on the webcast are with us. I'm Frances Spivey Weber, Vice Chair of the State Water Resources Control Board, and it is such a pleasure to share the opening of this nitrate technology workshop with Mark Starr, who is the Deputy Director for Environmental Health at CDPH. You'll be hearing from Mark in just a few minutes. Increasingly, both we at the State Water Board and at the Department of Public Health are recognizing the overlap between safe drinking water and clean water in lakes, streams, and in groundwater. And we're combining our efforts and working together more and more effectively to try to address these issues in a cost-effective way for everyone. We are using our talented staff, we're using our authorities, and we're using our expertise to try to address this and many other complicating issues that are surfacing in both drinking water and clean water as we move forward. It's particularly important for disadvantaged communities, so that's one of the reasons for having this workshop today, to particularly focus in on what the needs are of disadvantaged communities. And we're going to be, I hope, finding some solutions, but I'm not a total unrealistic person. I know that we'll be finding some interim solutions as well. We'll be identifying some areas where we'll want to do some testing, some piloting. We'll have failures, and we know that. And more research will be needed for those of you who are in the academic community. We will definitely have some of that as well. But we are moving forward, and this is an opportunity to touch base with one another and see where we are so that we can know how to most effectively move forward. Whatever is needed, those of you particularly in the disadvantaged communities who are having to deal with this problem should know that we at the State Water Resources Control Board and at CDPH, we're in on this with you 100%. It's extremely important to us, and we will do what needs to be done. We're not completely sure exactly what that is. I don't think it's possible to know for sure, but we are moving forward, and we want your cooperation, and we will certainly offer ours. Today we're going to, Gita is going to be describing what will be expected, but I just wanted to share with you that one of my expectations, and I will be here off and on most of today and tomorrow, is I am particularly interested in the costs of these systems. And there's a list on your program as to the kinds of things that we're going to be expecting. But I am going to be interested in the cost because affordability is going to be important, not just for the state or for the federal government, but also for those who have to put in the systems and manage them long term. The effectiveness of the treatment, it'll depend, and so effectiveness is particularly important. System reliability is also important, particularly if it's not being watched on a daily basis or on an hourly basis by someone in the community. How do we make sure that this is a reliable system longer term? And the suitability of these systems for small communities that may or may not have the expertise to keep them up. So those are some of the issues that I'll be watching for and listening for as you make your presentations. And again, thank you. Mark?
Thank you, Fran. I'm going to pop this down just a little bit for a moment, although I do like the waving banner up there. Good morning, everyone, and I really want to thank the Water Board and Fran and everyone for the opportunity to be here this morning and say a few words to you all. And on behalf of our Department of Public Health to welcome you to this workshop. We're really pleased to be a part of this workshop and pulling it all together, and I particularly want to thank my staff that have been integral in helping to pull this together, and you'll be hearing from many of them throughout the program. We're also very pleased to do this with the Water Board in particular, and as Fran mentioned, we collaborate in a number of areas between the Department of Public Health and the Water Board, ranging all the way from source water protection to recycled water to disposal of treatment residuals and many other areas. Our program, the Drinking Water Program in the Department of Public Health, has the primary responsibility and the key regulatory role of working with water systems to ensure that they deliver water that meets health-based standards to their customers and to the public. We cover systems all the way from the source of the water through the delivery system, all the way to delivery to the customers. And of course that includes treatment, which is the subject of the workshop here today. And we also have funding programs to assist systems that need that as well. The water systems we regulate are largely successful in this regard. At any given time, somewhere around 98–99% of the population that's served by community water systems in California receives water that's meeting all health-based standards. It's really a remarkable record, and we're one of the leaders in the nation here in California in that regard. The national standard is at 95%, so we're well above that. Nevertheless, there are water systems with that consistently exceed standards. And these, as Fran mentioned, are often in disadvantaged communities, smaller water systems, and sometimes in rural areas. They often lack the resources, they sometimes lack the expertise, the technical, managerial, financial capabilities that we refer to, and the customer base, economy of scale, to really be able to address these problems and improve their systems. And that's where we try and assist them. Because of this, in early 2012, we established a small water system plan and goal. And we created a list of water systems that have primary drinking water contaminants that we are targeting for improvement and bringing them back into compliance. There's 183 such systems that we've identified, and the small water system range that we are looking at is anywhere from 15 to 1,000 service connections. The population these systems serve is about 58,000. So this is a small percentage of the entire state, but certainly a significant population to make sure we bring back into compliance. Our initial goal is to bring 63 of these back into compliance, and the purpose of that goal is to bring small water system compliance into parity with large systems. So far, 19 have been returned to compliance, and the vast majority of the 183 systems are on the path for financial assistance in our programs. So bringing us back to nitrate, the number one contaminant that these small systems face is arsenic, but number two is nitrate. So we also have to consider that there are very small systems, less than 15 service connections, and domestic wells out there that are certainly contaminated with nitrates as well. We don't regulate them, and there's limited data available. So that's also a significant problem that needs to be addressed, and another population that's likely impacted by nitrates. So nitrate contamination of drinking water is a serious public health concern. You'll hear more about that from one of our speakers later. It can have a significant impact on individuals, families, and communities. It's often a legacy pollutant, one that often is without a responsible party and often affects communities that can least afford it, the remedies, as well as the operations and maintenance that would be required of a new system and the waste disposal. So you'll hear more about the challenges these communities are facing after the break this morning. So while resolving nitrate contamination is clearly more than just a technical problem, there are promising technologies that you're going to be hearing about that may decrease costs, increase efficiency, ease of operation, and decrease the treatment residuals. You'll hear about this both at the centralized water system level as well as at the individual residential level. Together we can work to implement appropriate drinking water treatment technologies to ensure the health and safety of individuals, families, and communities. And I want to applaud each of you for participating, each of you here in the room, those of you that are listening on the webinar as participants, as well as all the presenters for your ongoing efforts at nitrate innovation and to improve public health. So thank you once again, and enjoy the workshop.
Thank you, Mark. My name is Gita Kapai. I'm the Director of Public Participation for the Water Boards. I'll be your facilitator over the next 2 days. Couple of logistical things. The restrooms, most importantly, outside the doors to your left. In case of a fire alarm, please exit at the back of the room, go down the stairs and out to the park, and you'll be notified when you can come back in. Hopefully there won't be anything like that. Couple of logistical things. We have a very tight agenda. There are a lot of presentations. There's some individual speakers, panel discussions. Hopefully we're wanting to have a dialogue, want to make sure that all of your questions get answered, get a chance to understand the various treatment technologies that are being offered. And we've asked the presenters to, a number of questions, and hopefully that will allow you to compare and contrast, that the costs will be comparable because of the questions and the parameters that we set for how we want them to present their information. Because of the tight time frame, I will have about 5 minutes after the speakers for questions. The order that I will take them is that there are cards at the back of the room. If you'll fill out the cards, I'll take the cards first. Then those of you on the web, welcome. There is an email that you can send questions to. It is auditorium@calipa.ca.gov. Once again, auditorium@calipa.ca.gov. So if you send those questions in, we will have them read out and respond to them. And then finally, if there is time, we have roving microphones. We'll go around the room and answer any other questions you might have. So with that, I will go to the first presenter, John Borkovich.
Good morning, everyone. My name is John Borkovich, and yes, I think I'm on. Can everyone hear me okay? And this morning I'm going to spend a few minutes just briefly going over a general overview of nitrate and groundwater in California. So, why is nitrate an issue? Nitrate is the most prevalent man-made chemical in California. It's groundwater. Nitrate found in groundwater comes primarily from fertilizing material use, but can also come from septic systems. Drinking water above the health standard is particularly harmful to pregnant women and young children, which in particular blue baby syndrome. And once nitrate gets into groundwater, excuse me, it's very difficult to remove, and it's also very expensive, that you'll hear about later today with all the different technologies that are out there. So for more information about nitrate, we have a fact sheet from our GAMMA program that I'm the manager of, Groundwater Ambient Monitoring and Assessment Program here at DWQ, State Water Board, the Division of Water Quality, excuse me, too many acronyms. So for our next slide, depicted here is a generalized list of the top 10 detected chemicals that are above a health standard, and this is an excerpt from our report to the legislature that was released earlier this year as a result of AB 2222. AB 2222 required actually 2 reports to the legislature. This was the second one. And we worked closely with CDPH on extracting the data that they've provided to us that we house in our GeoTracker Gamma database. And we did several detailed queries over a particular time frame, a very specific time frame called a compliance cycle. And that was between the most recent compliance cycle was between 2002 and 2010. And when we looked at the data, we also looked at it very conservatively. We only chose those chemicals that were detected, picked wells that were detected more than once. So we wouldn't get any false positives in it. So as a result of that type of a detailed query, as Mr. Starr mentioned earlier, that arsenic is the most prevalent contaminant found in our drinking water wells, public drinking water wells in the state, followed closely by nitrate. This map here is a depiction of all of the data that we have in our system. So this is a image taken from our using data that's from CDPH, as well as information from our site cleanups that the regional boards manage. And there are about 54,000 wells in the state over all times, and any well that has any result above the MCL for nitrate, there were 6,767 wells. And in contrast, we also looked at just public drinking water wells with at least one hit. It's been a couple years since we've updated this particular map, but this is from our fact sheet on our GAMA website. We have several different chemicals of concern that have fact sheets associated with them, with these maps at the back. And at the end of the presentation, I have the URL to find more different chemicals of concern, such as arsenic, NDMA, others. But in this map, it shows that there are over 1,000 wells, public supply wells, that are active that have at least one detection of nitrate in it. This map here is another way of looking at the data. This was from our AB 2222 report that I mentioned earlier, the report to the legislature. Very, very conservative way of looking at the data. But even still, you'll notice in the areas that are circled, those were the two pilot areas that were required for us to do another report to the legislature, our nitrate report, where we contracted with the University of California at Davis with Dr. Harder and his team to look at various sources of nitrate in California in these two particular areas. But you'll notice that there are other parts of the state that also have issues with nitrate in their drinking water wells, because the different colors depict different concentrations above the MCL. So any well that shows up on this particular slide has a concentration that's above the MCL for that time frame. So what prompted the nitrate report? The nitrate report on the previous map, you notice that the circled areas were those picked out by the legislation, like I mentioned, and the other areas of the state have problems. But prior to writing our report, UC Davis was commissioned to produce a comprehensive document on defining the extent of nitrate contamination in those specific areas and identifying promising options for the water boards to consider. Some of the key findings that UC Davis found in their report was that for decades, nitrate from fertilizer and animal waste has infiltrated into groundwater. Nitrate detected today is mostly from fertilizer used decades ago. Secondly, agricultural fertilizers and animal waste applied to cropland are by far the largest regional sources of nitrate in groundwater. Other sources, though, can be locally relevant, such as septic systems. Nitrate loading reductions are possible, some at a modest cost. Traditional cleanup of nitrate in groundwater on a regional scale is costly, estimated into the billions of dollars. Blending treatment and alternative water supplies are more cost-effective, and long-term costs for safe drinking water for Tulare and Salinas was identified to be on the order of $36 million per year. If you extrapolated that out to a statewide estimate, it's about $90 million per year. Due to economic and infrastructure issues, some communities are harder hit, and they also identified that a nitrogen fertilizer fee could compensate affected communities for mitigation expenses and effects of nitrate pollution. So this slide here, the pie chart, was cropped out of or cut out of the UC Davis report, and identifies that in large part over 95% of nitrate in groundwater in these two areas of the state are from fertilizing materials, that is fertilizer and manure to cropland. So the recommendations in the UC Davis report, well actually I take that back, from our report, where we used information from the UC Davis report to help us frame our recommendations that we came up with. And so there were 15 recommendations that covered these four main areas of providing safe drinking water, monitoring, assessment, notification, nitrogen tracking and reporting system, and protecting groundwater. Several of the recommendations identify other agencies either as the lead agency or working in collaboration with others, such as the Department of Food and Ag, public health, and water resources. Many of the recommendations require legislation to provide long-term stable funding source. And for specifics on the report, this is the URL to find more information. So next steps. Based on the recommendations in the nitrate report to the legislature, these 4 pertain to the Water Board's actions without the need for legislation. And I also want to point out that 2 of the regional boards also have plans in place and that our report is building upon their efforts. These 4 in particular are related to identifying nitrate high-risk areas, working with experts to review our approach, looking at waste discharge requirements to see if they're protective of groundwater, and finally incorporating all these strategies together in our strategic work plan. And as I mentioned earlier, for more information on groundwater quality information in California, you're invited to visit our GeoTracker Gamma groundwater information system. It's the top URL, and the second URL is linked to our Gamma website. And that's it. Thank you.
Next. Regulatory requirements and health concerns. We've got Mark Bartston and Eric Migolino, I said that wrong, sorry, from CDPH.
Thank you, Gita, and welcome everybody here. What I want to do in my presentation in conjunction with Eric Migolino of our staff is to cover regulatory requirements for public water systems and health concerns related to nitrate, an overview and enough specifics for you guys to have an idea what public water systems are required to comply with, the public notification requirements, and some specifics on the health concerns related to nitrate. So the topics of the presentation are to talk about the CDPH role as a regulatory agency. We, with the California Department of Public Health, the Drinking Water Program, are responsible for the Safe Drinking Water Act implementation in California. We work under a primacy agreement with EPA. Our program has to be at least as stringent as EPA's. And within California, there's also what's called the local primacy agency. 32 of the counties have an agreement with us, with the Department of Public Health, to carry out the small water system program for systems under 200 connections within their county. The CDPH role, as I mentioned, is a regulatory agency, but we're also a technical assistance provider. We have a close working relationship with water systems. We are a decentralized program, and that's how we get things done. I'm going to cover data on nitrate violations statewide, some of the regulatory requirements for nitrate monitoring of the source and the treatment process, and then Eric will cover notification requirements and health concerns. So as a regulatory program, CDPH is basically a decentralized regulatory program. We have 23 district offices that regulate the public water systems in that local area. And then they also oversee the local primacy agencies, the counties, the 32 counties that carry out the small water system program for the less than 200, for most of the small systems less than 200 within their county. The philosophy of our regulatory program is based on prevention, the identification and correction of sanitary hazards, having an effective working relationship with water system personnel, including operators, managers, and decision makers, boards, and so on. We conduct regular detailed inspections and evaluations of system facilities. A lot of focus on the treatment process, but also the physical facilities, because that's where the problems with the physical facilities can result in other types of contamination. And we have a program to monitor for evaluation of the monitoring data that comes in. There's a lot of source monitoring required beyond just nitrate. That is, we have a unit and our districts evaluate that data. And then under the Safe Drinking Water Act, we are an enforcement agency also. So as far as technical assistance, our role is to support water systems to provide safe water and comply with standards. We also provide technical support and consistency statewide. The standards are the same across the state, but there's of course various local issues and constraints that our district offices and the local water systems are familiar with. So within that, all those local issues, we have to have consistency statewide. And then there's the evaluation of alternative treatment technologies, which is a big focus of this workshop today. We have one of my staff here, who you'll hear from, Eugene Leung, as our point person on evaluating alternative treatment technologies for drinking water. So I'm the chief of the technical operations section, which supports our district offices and the LPAs. Within my purview, we have our water treatment technologies program, which is what this is all about today. We have the operator certification program, the training of operators. We'll hear a little bit about what it takes to operate these type of systems that you'll be hearing about. We have a development of drinking water regulations that are at least as stringent as what's required on the federal level. We also have the water treatment device certification program, point of use and point of entry programs. You'll be hearing tomorrow from a representative from NSF and WQA on what's involved in verifying that these point of use and point of entry programs do what they're designed to do and what they claim to do. So you're going to hear quite a bit about that tomorrow. I have a staff who carries that out, who's here today also. And then our program is also involved in the safe use of recycled water in a partnership with the state board and the regional boards, who have the ultimate enforcement authority for the safe use of recycled water. Now, centralized treatment plants. Now, we as engineers like centralized treatment plants, but the reality is they're expensive, they take time to build. We believe that treatment of all water is more protective of public health compared to point of use or point of entry systems. Now, that's fairly obvious for some contaminants. That, for example, a contaminant that can volatilize in the shower, there's a route of exposure through that air that a point of use device would not protect you. Now, point of entry is designed to treat all of the water that goes into a house. But in general, we like centralized treatment. However, it's expensive and costly to operate. Safe water pipe to your house is super convenient. I'm sure you've all noticed every day. Point of use requires extra work and inconvenience. You'll hear tomorrow on a case study from the Community Water Center in installing point of use for some residents of the town of Munson. I think it'll be a real good presentation on what they actually were faced with in taking these devices out, helping people install them in their house, and helping make sure they work. Very interesting story. Bottled water is inconvenient, but can be an interim solution. It is not allowed as a permanent solution under the state or federal Safe Drinking Water Act. In the regulations themselves, you'll hear about best available technology for treatment for nitrate and nitrite. This best available technology are the technologies that have been identified as effective in reducing a specific contaminant. In this case, nitrate, you have ion exchange, reverse osmosis, and electrodialysis are the ones identified in our regulations. And for nitrite, ion exchange and reverse osmosis. I want to give you a little bit of information on the compliance statistics for nitrate. How many public water systems have a problem with this? Well, John talked about the AB 22 report, AB 2222 report, and the first statistic I have there is from that report. There are 205 community water systems that have one or more wells above the MCL. Now, that does not mean that they are using those wells. Many medium and larger systems have the ability to shut off a well that is high in a contaminant. The smaller systems, as you know, don't usually have that luxury. And the second statistic, in 2011, there were 96 public water systems statewide that exceeded the MCL for nitrate. They had a nitrate violation during that year. And the median population of these systems is less than 100 people. So economy of scale is an issue. I want to touch on what are the regulatory requirements for actually monitoring the sources and treatment process for nitrate and nitrite. For source monitoring, the requirement, the minimum sampling is specified in the regulations, and additional sampling is required by the regulatory agency based on requirements in the regulations and local conditions reflected in the permit. Then there's monitoring of a treatment process. Every treatment process has to be monitored as required by the regulatory agency through the permitting process. Then in some cases, there's distribution system monitoring, especially in the case of blending, and as required by the regulatory agency based on the permit requirements. As far as frequency of the source water monitoring, sampling frequency for community systems, groundwater, annual sampling is required, minimum. Surface water, quarterly is required initially, but may be reduced to annually if results are low. And the maximum contaminant level for nitrate is 45 milligrams per liter as nitrate. And for nitrite, it's 1 milligram per liter as nitrite. And there's specific follow-up sampling requirements in the event that a sample is either above the standard or is above half of the drinking water standard. So if the results are greater than the maximum contaminant level, the water system must require their laboratory have an arrangement to contact that water system within 24 hours of getting that result. The water system has a responsibility to collect a repeat sample within 24 hours, and if they are unable to resample, to do tier 1 public notification right away. And they have a requirement to consult with the regulatory agency on any MCL exceedance. Now, if a source goes to about above half of the MCL, there's a special monitoring requirement. Go to quarterly samples as a minimum for 1 year and review those results with the regulatory agency for ongoing sampling requirements. And what if the notification requirements if the MCL is exceeded? So the water system has a responsibility to consult with the regulatory agency within 24 hours of notification of an exceedance. Provide public notification as soon as possible, but within 24 hours. The CDPH has notification templates with more details and mandatory language and things like that. Needless to say, there's mandatory language and things like that, but the important thing is that each public water system has a system to get the information to everybody because of the acute health concern with nitrates. So nitrate being an acute health concern is a tier 1 notification. We have a template with some of the required language. Eric Migolino will tell a little bit more about that. I have a couple of disclaimers and hopefully helpful tips. Always look at the regulations for the full details of all the sampling requirements for nitrates. There's special requirements for standby wells and other unique situations. And as always, talk to your regulatory agency. And more resources on the topic, John's reports that he mentioned. Then the third report is kind of interesting. It's a draft report by Tulare County. It's management and non-infrastructure solutions. I mentioned that we like treatment plants, but we really like consolidation. Any type of consolidation can benefit small water systems, whether it's actually intertying. You're going to hear about management consolidation, operation consolidation. That's where we need to put our thinking, and that's a lot better than a central treatment plant. I'm going to turn it over to Eric here for the rest of the presentation on the health concerns related to nitrates. And then at the end, we'll have some time for questions. Right, Gita?
Morning, everybody. I'm Eric Migolino, and I am going to speak about the multivariate approach, acute health effects of nitrates, and the importance of public notification. Now, I'm going to go to this first slide here, and this is something that John had touched upon, and this is important. This is basically the sources of nitrate. It's important to see that the first step, basically, or the best strategy is prevention. So the thing is, if there can be a reduction, basically, in fertilizers, which has already been a lifelong thing, and even though it's been reduced, you're still seeing it leach into the water. A reduction in animal waste, and because that also leaches in water, and more protective septic systems. The thing is, then we would have sorry about that. That would be the first step or the first strategy in preventing the leaching of nitrates into our groundwater. Okay. for the multi-barrier approach, one of the key points here is basically the well location and construction. And if I could back up one more time here, I want you to notice something here is the ground flow of water. That's a very, very important point, because the thing is now if you're going to put your well after basically where the leaching begins, then you're going to end up with a greater amount of contamination in your well. So that refers back to your location, okay? Your construction of your well, basically, the construction of your well is very, very important, because that will actually also assist in preventing leaching into your water. Okay. Okay. Now, once we know that the water's now that we know that the nitrates have already entered into the water, this is where all the business begins with monitoring it. So it's important to know the source quality of the water. So once you know the source quality of the water, as it moves on, we want to make sure that we have effective treatment, which Mark has talked about. And then for the distribution and storage, what that comes down to is once the water's been treated, distributing the water, distribution lines, basically the storage of the water, you want to make sure that you prevent recontamination of any of the water. Now, once the water is being delivered, this is the next step. Basically, this is the QA. So now we're monitoring. If you notice, we're monitoring the water as source, and we're also monitoring as treated. So that's the almost the final step. And then this is what the Tier 1 notice is. I mean, this is an example of the Tier 1 notice as we violate the. I mean, as the MCL might be violated. Is making sure that people are educated on the health effects of nitrates. Now, the thing is, we need to make sure that people become their own advocates and they protect themselves. If they do not know what the detriments of drinking nitrate-contaminated water, then the thing is they're not going to be able to protect themselves and make an informed choice in drinking, for instance, bottled water, or finding alternate sources of water from other places. And I'm going to touch upon this very quickly. Acute versus chronic. Sorry. Acute versus chronic. And this is more or less the not the exposure, but the onset of the health effects that occur. So typically, when you look at acute effects are usually happening with hours, days, or weeks, and they're quite rapid. So what you'll see is usually GI disturbances, nausea, vomiting. Those are typical things, and you'll have maybe possibly organ damage. And if the toxicity is high enough, dose is high enough, then you could even end up having death. So it can be as severe as that. Now, in regards to chronic, then the thing is that's something that you would see over time. Typically, we're looking at neurological, physical development. Much like children taking it in, as they develop, you won't notice it right away. A good example is lead in paint, or lead in water. Children drinking that, they don't. I mean, you won't notice it, but what happens is they have developmental problems and behavioral problems later on. So it's a slow. I mean, it ensues very slowly. You see CNS damage, organ damage, and repeated insults to those organs and to particular systems. Typically, you can end up with carcinomas. So that's a key point. And then, most importantly, death again. Okay. So when we look at the health effects of nitrates, the most vulnerable population is babies. And there's a particular reason for that, because their physiological systems is not fully developed. Their gastric pH is a little bit higher, which favors the conversion of nitrates to nitrite. and their fetal hemoglobin, which is not the adult hemoglobin, so the fetal hemoglobin, not fully developed, is more prone to become methemoglobin. And I forgot the most important point at the top there is that children are they're not food eaters, they're drinkers. So what they're going to end up drinking is a lot of formula. So what happens is they drink more fluid to their body ratio. Now, I mentioned this in here again for the especially vulnerable subgroups. The dehydrated or otherwise weakened infant. 2 points there. If they're dehydrated, they're going to drink even more. That's just case in point. And if they're weakened, typically their GI is actually thrown off. So what happens is you end up with a more favorable condition for conversions of nitrates to nitrites. Okay. The next point there is something that I brought up because of recent studies. Pregnant women and unborn children. So women don't realize that they might not even realize that they're pregnant in their first month. So they're drinking plenty of water, and if it has nitrates in it, and it combines with nitrosyl drugs, and those are things that contain amines. They can be antihistamines, antibiotics, a number of over-the-counter meds. They could be taking those things. And studies have shown that they combine with nitrites, and they will make N-nitrosyl compounds. And those N-nitrosyl compounds are what we call teratogenic. So they will actually damage the baby in utero as the baby is developing. So neurotube defects such as spina bifida or incomplete enclosure of your spinal cord and protrusion of your spinal cord. So we'll see things like that. Exposure mode, that's just mentioning, again, the mixing of formula, because basically the children are having formula. Now, the symptoms that we see here are the cyanosis, which is the blue baby syndrome, irritability, and stupor. So they're kind of sleepy and tired because they're not getting enough enough oxygen to their brain. Now, the blue baby syndrome in this case is called infantile methemoglobinemia. And how that works is this: is that the nitrite oxidizes the iron in hemoglobin, and it reduces its oxygen carrying capacity. Actually, it kills it. So babies are incapable of this oxygen transportation. That picture of that baby there, just an example. They're not blue. Like it's funny, when I was looking for a picture, I'm going to tell you this. When I was looking for a picture, the pictures that popped up on the internet were like the Blue Man Group. I mean, it was just they're not blue. I mean, they end up with a little grayish hue to them, but they're not really that blue. Okay. The reason why they say less than 6 months is because 6 months is the key, because a lot of children are being weaned at that time. When they become weaned, so basically they're moving from mommy to formula, and they're drinking a lot. So there's that. Again, we talk about the gastrointestinal physiology. Again, the high pH, and then on top of that, the infants have low met hemoglobin reductase activity. What that means is this: is that if they end up with met hemoglobin, they'll have difficulty in converting it back into either their fetal hemoglobin or regular hemoglobin. Now, Mark talked about this. It is the Peer 1 notification. I could read this for you, but the thing is, I'm going to go ahead and sum it, and it really comes down to two things. The age, is telling a party that, or a person, that if they have a child, if they're 6 months, they're going to be susceptible to this. So it's really focusing on children. Okay, and two, not to drink. Basically, that is not to drink the water. I mean, that's really the key. I mean, and find an alternate source. This is what we talk about, making an informed decision, because they have to know that these nitrates are what's going to cause this effect. Okay. Okay. Some common questions. that get brought up here. Health concerns with chronic nitrates at lower levels. Now, with adults, it's not a problem because our methemoglobin reductase is just fine. So we have we readily convert methemoglobin back into hemoglobin. But with people with impaired systems, there are people with impaired systems that could still experience these cyanotic effects as adults. Okay. The other health concerns with chronic nitrates is that you can actually form N-nitrosyl compounds and end up with carcinomas. And there are associations with nitrates, at least not nitrates specifically, but indirectly nitrates combining with, to form nitrosyl compounds and causing carcinomas. Which moves to the second question, which is, are there carcinogenic effects? There are a number of papers out there that show that. A direct relationship to nitrates, I can't say, but the compounds that are formed can be carcinogenic and can be teratogenic. Okay. Concerns related to breastfeeding. When I was in medical school, they always told us, at least told the mothers, breasts is best because that was the way to go. The studies that I've looked at is women can actually drink up to 100 milligrams per liter of nitrate water, and it doesn't get expressed in the milk. So that's quite a good barrier. I mean, if I were to educate the public and let them know that they had nitrate in water, specifically, let's say new mothers, I would say don't wean your baby. Don't wean your baby. Synergistic effects with contaminants. Forming N-nitrosyl compounds can become carcinogenic. There are a number of studies that have been out there. Brenda basically put one out saying that she was basically looking for a relationship between amine drugs and nitrates, and found that there was still an underlying mechanism, but she didn't look at everything else that was in the water. So her conclusion was she needed to look further into it because there could be other combinations and other effects going on with other contaminants. So, and if you want to find us, that's where we're at.
Thank you, Eric. Actually, we're right on time. The questions were more for some of the other presenters later, so did you have a question, Brent? Okay. Are there any questions in the audience on any of the presentations you've heard so far? Yes. If you could, yeah.
Thank you. And it was really interesting to hear about other potential health effects. And I just wonder, is it possible to put on CDPH's website like a link to some of those other studies? Because in a lot of communities we work with, there's a lot of questions about, is this only a concern for pregnant women and babies? And if there are other potential health hazards, I think it's good for the rest of the population to know that.
Okay, and I do want to announce to those of you in the room and on the web that all of the PowerPoints that are being presented today and tomorrow will be posted on the Water Board's website. So, okay, with that, we've got...
One quick question.
Yes.
Eric, you used the term teratogenic. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Teratogenic is basically affecting the development of a child in utero, basically as they're developing when a woman's pregnant.
Thank you. I encourage all of you to network in the lobby, on breaks. If you have conversations you need, go on outside. There will be some time at lunchtime and in between the sessions. With that, we're going to take a 17-minute break and resume at 10 after 10. Thank you.